It's May 17th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the government's plan to increase medical school admission seats. A Seoul High Court on Thursday ruled in favor of the government's long push, which paves the way for the first quota hike in 27 years. But members of the medical community, including doctors who walked away from their posts in protest, are still showing no interest in returning to work. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Stock Index hit 40,000 for the first time on Thursday, with a renewed investor hopes for a soft landing for the U.S. economy, following a favorable inflation report. The leaders of China and Russia showed off their bromance in Beijing, even issuing a joint statement on their opposition to what they labeled intimidation by the U.S. and its allies against North Korea. Washington warned Beijing that China can't keep both the West and Russia on its side. The first medical school admission quota hike in nearly 3 decades here in South Korea is likely to be pushed through, with the Seoul High Court rejecting an injunction filed by the medical circle. Our Choi Soo-hyung starts us off this morning.
The Seoul High Court on Thursday rejected an application submitted by medical students, exam candidates, professors and trainee doctors to halt the government's plan to expand the number of new medical students by 2,000 starting in 2025. Right after, the government said it respects the court's opinion, while trainee doctors announced that they will not return to their post regardless of the outcome. The court ruled that medical school professors, trainee doctors and exam candidates are not the parties involved in the lawsuit and dismissed their claims. Regarding medical students, while they are considered as a party, the court rejected their claims due to concerns of significant implications on public welfare. This court's decision is pivotal, as now government can enter the final stages of its medical reform plan. During the prolonged dispute, the medical community filed over 20 lawsuits to the court, but all applications were rejected in the first instance. On April 30th, the Seoul High Court requested specific evidence from the government regarding the increase of 2,000 to the med school quota within the appeal filed by the medical community. The medical community continued to argue that the meeting to discuss the quota was too brief, lasting just an hour, and was nothing more than a formal act to confirm the number brought by the government. Last week, the government submitted approximately 50 items of documented evidence. This included research reports which were used as the basis for the quota number itself, as well as meeting records from the medical school quota allocation committee. Ahead of the final decision, the Culture Ministry released the results of a public opinion poll showing that over 70% of the population supported an expansion of the medical school admission quota. As the government won the second trial, all eyes are on whether the medical community will appeal to set up a third trial. However, it seems that this is not scheduled to take place until at least mid-June, while the official admission guides for each university will be finalized by this month. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average surpassed the 40,000 mark during intraday trading for the first time on Thursday. It took less than 3.5 years for it to reach the milestone from the 30,000 mark. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
Amid optimism over a possible rate cut in the near future due to positive inflation data released earlier in the week, the U.S. stock market responded well to start Thursday's trading session. Despite the trading day ending with losses throughout the major indexes, the Dow Jones Industrial Average reached the 40,000 mark for the first time ever during intraday trading. The Dow Jones ended the trading day at 39,869, down 0.1% from the previous trading day. The Dow surpassed the 10,000 mark for the first time in March 1993 and the 20,000 mark in January 2017. While it took 24 years to double its figure during that time, it only took 7 years to rise from the 20,000 level to the 40,000 level and less than 3.5 years to go from 30,000 to 40,000. The Wall Street Journal on Thursday evaluated the recent milestone, saying that when the U.S. Fed began raising interest rates about 2 years ago to cool down the overheating economy, the Dow Jones surpassing the 40,000 mark seemed like it would be difficult to achieve. However, it said companies increased jobs, people continued to spend, and inflation cooled. More than anything, the economic recession predicted by many economists did not come to fruition, giving investors hope that stock prices would continue to rise. It added that the rapid rise of large tech stocks due to the development of artificial intelligence was also a factor in revitalizing the market. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is one of the 3 major indexes in the U.S. stock market, consisting of 30 blue-chip stocks representing major U.S. industries. The weighted average of stocks is calculated based on stock prices rather than market capitalization. 이승재, Arirang News.
Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping have reunited for their 43rd meeting, this time in China. They issued a joint statement backing North Korea that they're against U.S. military intimidation toward the regime. Shin Se-byuk has the details.
Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin have expressed their opposition to military intimidation by the United States and its allies towards North Korea. The statement came after their summit meeting in Beijing, where the 2 leaders signed a joint statement on Thursday. Putin's visit to Beijing marks his first foreign trip since beginning his 5th term last week and highlights the growing importance of China-Russia relations. This is the 4th meeting between the 2 leaders since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. In the joint statement, Xi and Putin condemned the military threats and confrontations by the U.S. and its allies, which they said heightened tensions on the Korean peninsula. They urged the U.S. to de-escalate military tensions and abandon the use of sanctions. The 2 leaders also agreed to deepen military trust and cooperation, expand joint exercises, and regularly conduct combined sea and air patrols to strengthen military collaboration. Later that day, the 2 heads of state held a restrictive meeting for an in-depth discussion on strategic issues of common concern, particularly regarding the ongoing war in Ukraine. President Xi emphasized the need for a new security framework in relation to the Ukraine war and reiterated Beijing's commitment to a political settlement of the crisis. He also expressed support for an international peace conference at an appropriate time. Regarding the recent Putin-Xi summit, the U.S. criticized China's stance, saying Beijing, quote, cannot have its cake and eat it too when it comes to its relationship with Russia.
You can't want to have good, further, stronger, deepened relationships with Europe and other countries while simultaneously continuing to fuel the biggest threat to European security in a long time.
The White House also brushed off Moscow and Beijing's reaffirmation of ties. In a briefing on Thursday, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said that the Biden administration doesn't see anything new in the joint statement. The summit between the Chinese and Russian leaders comes as Moscow has become more dependent on Beijing. With China refusing to condemn the war in Ukraine and with increasing sanctions from the United States and its allies on Russia, deepening cooperation between the 2 historic powerhouses means relations with the U.S. are likely to become even more tense. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Washington says Russia has used more than 40 North Korean ballistic missiles imported from the regime in its war in Ukraine. U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller on Thursday also stressed that Russia's use of North Korean ballistic missiles is in direct violation of UN Security Council resolutions. He added that Washington will take all appropriate steps to combat the destabilizing partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang, while urging the international community to do the same. Meanwhile, in response to the Washington's allegation, the regime's leader Kim Jong-un's younger sister Kim Yo-jong called it nonsense. She explained that the technologies of the weapon system the regime recently developed and updated cannot be made public and hence cannot be exported. She added that North has no intention of exporting any military technology anywhere. South Korea's economy is right on track for recovery, according to a think tank based in South Korea. Now, it's the first time such a related local body has proposed a 2% range growth forecast. We turn to Professor Shin Se-don for more. Great to have you back, Professor Shin.
Good morning.
So, first off, South Korea's economy is believed to expand by 2.6% this year. Strong global demand for chips will be the main driver for that projected growth. The question is, will exports of chips lead the country's growth for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, for the first 4 months, semiconductor exports has been growing about 10%, the 20%. And definitely is going to lead, Korean economic growth. The problem is the semiconductor exports is about a little less than 20% of our total exports. And the problem is, what about the other 80% of exports, including steels, including automobile? And there's a pretty much a sign that, export in the automobile and export in the steel, it is kind of a little stagnating. So even though semiconductor exports are increasing very rapidly for the first 4 months, you have to see what's going to happen on the exports of the automobile, steel, and the chemical products. So it is not pretty definite, whether the export growth will be continuing in the second half of this year.
Professor Shin, that's also in line with the possibility that growth centered on exports may weaken with global trade shrinking because of U.S. protectionism that could possibly deepen after the November U.S. presidential election. Is this a possible scenario? What's your take on this?
Well, whether U.S. Presidential election will affect Korean trades, well, I doubt it. But whether, the protection of the United States against the Chinese exports, I think that's going to have a secondary effect on Korean export in the sense that, if protectionism by the United States affects Chinese exports, then many of the Korean companies are exporting to, China for their exports. So it would have a secondary effect on Korean export. But overall, I think it would not be as significant as, most people will believe.
Well, concerns do linger, though, over sluggish consumption that we have to talk about as consumer prices remain pretty high here in the country. It's also forecasting, the KDI report is forecasting that consumer prices will go up 2.6% this year. Is this a good sign? Well,
yeah, consumption price remaining staying below 3%, that will be a good sign. But for the last couple of years, real Korean economic problem is sluggish consumption or domestic demand. And actually, for the first quarter, the domestic demand has negative growth, negative contribution to Korean economy. So real problem in Korean economy right now, export doing very fine. But the problem is consumption is very sluggish. And there are many reasons, private consumption is sluggish in Korea because of high interest rate payment, and sluggish, housing prices. But the economy is not doing pretty good other than the export side. So real key for Korean economic, growth is whether consumption will pick up in the second half. And that, I think, is critically depending upon the future course of interest rates.
Definitely. Well, the report also added that it doesn't believe it believes that no additional pump priming steps are needed at the moment. And, some people are saying that such comments are targeted the main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung's pledge to provide cash handouts to everyone here in the country. Now, Professor Shin, do you as an expert argue that there's no need for those additional pump priming steps?
Right. We know that this year economic growth will be about 6% according to KDI, about 2.5% for another institution. So it is definitely true that Korean economic growth will be higher than 2%. And if you have to pay, $250,000 to everybody, that has to be paid last year, in which economic growth was 1.4%. So I think when economy is growing over 2%, it is, I think, premature, for the government or for the political party to argue that we have to give, 250,000 for everybody. I think it's almost nonsense.
All right, Professor Shin, before I let you go briefly, the KDI projects the Korean economy will grow 2.1% next year in 2025. Now, that's lower than what we were expecting this year, which is at 2.6. Why a lower growth outlook then?
Yeah, 100%. That is because KDI is projecting the export growth in next year, 2025, will be about 2.4%, which, in this year, they predicted that it's going to be 5.6%. So the main difference in economic growth rate this year, which is 2.6, and 2.1 next year, I think that is due to about half the rate of growth in export from 5.6% to 2.4%.
All right, we still have a full half of the year left for the 2024, so we'll see how that goes. And thank you, Professor Shin, so much for your time and your analysis this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Always my pleasure.
To raise awareness of South Korean abductees being held in North Korea, the Ministry of Unification has revealed a special garden to remember them. Our North Korean Affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil takes us there.
This year's Seoul International Garden Show opened on Thursday, where visitors can enjoy beautiful flowers and greenery along the Hangang River.
하나, 둘, 셋.
On the corner of the extensive garden this year, there's a very special greenhouse dedicated to abductees who are being held in North Korea. The Garden of 3 Forget-Me-Not Blossoms was designed and created by artist Hangang to remember those who still haven't come home.
The Unification Ministry hopes opening up this glass greenhouse garden filled with these Forget-Me-Not sculptures dedicated to South Korean abductees taken to the north will help raise awareness to remember them.
The Ministry of Unification acknowledges over 160,000 people were taken to the north and didn't make it home. They were taken during and after the Korean War in the form of abductees, detainees, and prisoners of war who were not repatriated. The 3 Forget-Me-Nots each represent those groups.
We organized this garden to publicize the issue of abductees in the country. Together with the families of the victims, we want to bring this issue to the attention of the South Korean people, as well as the international community, so that everyone can know about this and call for the immediate return of the abductees from North Korea.
The families of the abductees also gathered at the garden. They include Mr. Che, whose father was working on a fishing boat when he was taken to the north in 1967.
We are thankful that the government is taking great care in the issue of abductees, and that many endeavors are being made to raise international awareness. We don't ask North Korea for much. We just want to know if our family members are still alive or not.
The garden with the Forget-Me-Nots will be displayed until October as a reminder of those still separated and to urge continued efforts for their safe return. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Si-young, and now we turn off to stories from around the world. We begin today in Bahrain, where the 33rd Arab Summit kicked off on Thursday in the country's capital, Manama. The 22-member bloc issued a declaration calling for the presence of international protection and peacekeeping forces of the United Nations in the occupied Palestinian territories until the implementation of a two-state solution. The statement called for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip while blaming Israel's obstruction for failed negotiations. It also condemned Israel's aggression against the Palestinian city of Rafah, saying that it ignored international warnings of the disastrous humanitarian consequences. The declaration also called for all Palestinian factions to join the umbrella of the Palestine Liberation Organization, the political rivals of the Hamas. The summit was chaired by Bahrain's king, Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, while delegates from the Arab world, including Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, as well as the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, took part in the conference. Guterres said that any assault on Rafah is unacceptable and that the two-state solution is the only permanent way for peace. Moving over to the Gaza Strip, the United States military has completed the installation of an anchored floating pier to boost the delivery of aid into the region. On Thursday morning, Vice Admiral Brad Cooper of U.S. Central Command said that the pier was successfully affixed and in the coming days will commence the delivery of aid. For more than a week, no food supplies have entered the two main border crossings in southern Gaza. U.S. President Joe Biden had announced the plan for the pier in March, while the UN stressed that land delivery of aid was the most viable, effective and efficient method. An autopsy report on the Massachusetts teen who died after participating in a spicy tortilla chip challenge on social media said he died from ingesting a large quantity of chili pepper extract. 14-year-old Harris Wallaber died in September last year after eating the Paki chip as part of the manufacturer's One Chip Challenge, popular on social media. According to the autopsy report, Harris died of cardiopulmonary arrest from eating a food substance with high capsaicin concentration. The teenager also had a congenital heart defect. Moving to the final story of the week, a 90-year-old female sprinter from Italy claimed another world record in her age group by running 200 meters outdoors in 51.47 seconds. Emma Maria Mazenga, who was born in 1933, holds 5 world records, 9 European records, and 28 Best Italian performances across masters sprinting categories. She beat the previous record of 53.35 seconds held by Japan's Emiko Saito earlier this month. Mazenga said she likes to have a beer with her fellow runners, although not many are left in her age group. She lightheartedly said, "If I have no competitors, I know that I'll win from the start, so I aim to do a good time." She also said that the sport prevented loneliness and had helped her through some difficult times.
Good morning. It was breezy, but such a refreshing day we had yesterday under blue skies. Today looks to be a repeat of yesterday, but there will be a rise in temperatures. So the temperature roller coaster continues with big gaps between lows and highs. Now the entire country will notice a jump in highs today under lots of sunshine. Seoul will see highs going nearly 5 degrees higher this afternoon. Meanwhile, Gyeongsangdo provinces and nearby areas will have summer-like warmth this afternoon. So Daegu tops out at 28 degrees, Gyeongju at 29 degrees Celsius. Strong UV rays will shine down on you, so have your sunglasses and a hat ready to protect yourself from bright sunlight. Air quality will be normal to good nationwide all day today. The weekend looks to be a promising one, and Sunday looks to be even more summer-like with an expected high of 28 degrees here in the capital. Then gorgeous sunny weather will take us through next week, and the mornings will get warmer as well. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next Monday at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.